Welcome back to the show. We are now going to meet the bloggers. And our bloggers this week are Marcy Wheeler. She blogs as Empty Wheel on firedoglake.com. She's also the author of Anatomy of Deceit about the pre-war intelligence, the Bush administration's justification for the war, and a CIA leak of Valerie Plame. She's also the world's leading expert on Karl Rove. Did you know that? That's going to be very useful in a second. Liliana Segura is a writer and activist living in New York. She's a staff writer and associate editor for alternet.org. And Baratunde Thurston is a comic and vigilante pundit, which always sounds fun to me. He blogs at jackandjillpolitics.com. He's coming to us actually live today from Netroots Nation, which is woot to the woot. Terrific. And what we're going to do is, before we start talking about how Karl Rove didn't show up for a subpoena and what that means, we're going to show you a video from sendrovetojail.com where you can sign a petition as well. But let's check out the video to set this up for you.
Him to testify before Congress today. The committee says Rove broke the law.
I mean, let's not forget who we're talking about. There's a guy who was one of the chief salesmen of the Iraq War. He outed Valerie Plame and almost was indicted for it.
So many scandals that Karl Rove has been involved in.
I mean, this is a guy who's made an entire career out of hoodwinking the American people.
Former Alabama Governor Don Siegelman was a rare breed, a popular Democratic governor in a red state.
But while he was governor, the U.S. Department of Justice launched multiple investigations that went on year after year.
There have been allegations made, very specific allegations, that Karl Rove went to the Department of Justice and instigated them to push this case.
They targeted Don Siegelman because they could not beat him fair and square.
Rove's longtime friend and political confidant Bill Canary was married to the U.S. attorney whose office brought this new round of charges.
Now, a Republican lawyer from Alabama, Jill Simpson, has come forward to claim that the Siegelman prosecution was part of a 5-year secret campaign to ruin the governor.
She had heard leading Alabama Republicans talk of Rove's involvement in the case. 52 former state attorneys general, Democrats and Republicans chimed in, demanding that Congress investigate.
But to be clear, you did not contact the Justice Department about this case?
I read about, I'm going to simply say what I've said before, which is I found out about Don Siegelman's investigation and indictment by reading about it in the newspaper.
But that's not a denial.
I read about, I heard about it, read about it, learned about it for the first time by reading about it in the newspaper.
Don't waste any time. I think the House and Senate Judiciary Committee should subpoena Karl Rove and bring him before those committees, let him put his hand on the Bible and either tell the truth or lie under oath or plead the fifth.
What I want him to do is go and swear in front of the United States Congress and swear what he is saying is true.
Invocation of executive privilege by Rove in this matter really is, I think, ridiculous.
He has no cloak of executive privilege here because no one's asking him about what he talked about, president or vice president. We want to ask him what he talked about with the Department of Justice.
No American citizen has the right to ignore a congressional subpoena. Not Karl Rove, not anyone else.
I gotta admit, my favorite part of that video was when Rove goes, but my second favorite part was Wexler at the end saying, hey, no one can ignore a congressional subpoena. So Marcy, I want to start with you. If I said to Congress, hey, I'm not interested in showing up after you subpoenaed me, what would happen to me?
I'm sure Mukasey would then refer that to the D.C. District U.S. Attorney, and he'd throw you in jail.
Now, Rove did just that. What is his excuse for not having that applied to him, what would normally be applied to every American citizen?
Rove's actually arguing not that Bush invoked executive privilege, but that a president's aides have absolute immunity from having to show up before Congress. So he's basically saying, you know, anybody who kind of hangs out with the president and is part of the president's inner circle can blow off Congress whenever they want to. He's also actually relying on stuff the DOJ said last year regarding a completely different subpoena.
All right, so let me understand that, because the press is saying that he's using executive privilege. Are you saying he's actually not using executive privilege?
Yeah, if you look at the document that Fred Fielding sent to Rove's lawyer, and then the letter that Rove's lawyer sent to Congress, the phrase executive privilege doesn't appear in either one of those. What they're talking about instead is this much more expansive notion which isn't, I mean, normal with executive privilege, right? DOJ reviews it, determines whether or not it's a fair invocation of executive privilege. They look at the documents. They try and weigh the interests of Congress against the executive branch. With this absolute immunity stuff, they're just saying, we don't have to show up. We don't need DOJ to tell us it's okay. We just can blow off Congress whenever we want to.
Now, absolute immunity sounds like a lot of fun. I wish I had absolute immunity, but is it really based in the law? Is there any, case where the Supreme Court said, yes, executive branch officials have absolute immunity?
No. I mean, there has never been a court that says, oh, yeah, okay, we buy off on this ridiculous notion. It came from William Rehnquist, when he worked for DOJ back in the Reagan administration, kind of invented this. But even then, he said that it only applied to people who were still employed by the president, still presidential aide. So if William Rehnquist were alive today, I think we could go to him and he'd go, no, Karl Rove can't even have that. I mean, I thought it was kind of cool, but Karl Rove is not privileged to it because he's been fired by the administration.
Yeah, and finally, if these absolute immunity doesn't apply, Marcy, and executive privilege not only doesn't apply, he didn't ask for it to apply, then he really should be arrested, shouldn't he?
Well, and the thing that's more ridiculous, Junk, is that this absolute immunity only applies if the actions that Congress wants to talk to you about were part of your quote-unquote official duties. So Karl Rove and Fred Fielding have told Congress now that it was part of Rove's official duties to carry out witch hunts against Democrats. That's the argument they're making. So it's completely ridiculous.
And a violation of the Hatch Act. So, Baratunde, what are we supposed to do if the executive branch simply doesn't enforce the law? They're supposed to arrest Rove, and they say, we're not going to. What are you going to do about it?
Well, here's the beauty of what's going on with Congress. I mean, I never really expect Congress to do much. But when they go as far as issuing a subpoena, they draw a line in the sand, and a line that you're not supposed to cross. Now, if they just want to ignore it, that's fine, but they're going to draw that line. And Karl Rove is acting like some kind of supervillain, which is exciting but also frightening. They really have to go after this. If not, I might have to make a citizen's arrest.